Hi, I'm Ellen Summers, and I'm the Assistant Director at Syracuse Jewish Family Service. And I've been working in the arena of cognitive health for probably 25 years. And I've worked with people who have no cognitive problems and just want to really work on their skills, to people who have mild cognitive impairment and people who have more significant impairment. So what I want to do today is just share with you some brain fitness tips, things that you can do very easily from your home to work on your brain health. Let me start by saying that people with Parkinson's disease, about a third can experience some cognitive issues, and oftentimes those are problems that don't get as much attention as the motor symptoms of Parkinson's, in Parkinson's disease. So today I really want to focus on things that you can do to help yourself, whether you're feeling like your cognitive skills are fine, to people who are maybe feeling like you are experiencing some challenges with your cognitive health. So I want to start by saying that oftentimes when people think of cognitive fitness or brain health, the first thing that comes to mind is memory. And they tend to think or equate memory skills with brain health. But brain health is actually a lot bigger than memory. So people have to recognize these other skills as well, because they can also be affected with Parkinson's disease as well as other conditions. Some of those things include the ability, for example, to organize and plan and sequence things, which we refer to as executive function. Another area of cognitive health is your ability to simply pay attention and sustain your attention over a period of time. It includes your ability to communicate and express yourself and articulate what you want to communicate to others. It also includes reasoning and judgment. So there's a much bigger arena of functional skills that come under the header of brain fitness. And some of the activities I'm going to talk about might address one or more of those areas. Particularly with Parkinson's disease, 3 areas have been mentioned as being problematic sometimes for people with Parkinson's disease. So one of those areas is slowed processing. So your thought processes are slowed down some. Another area has to do with memory, and specifically with short-term memory. And the third area has to do with multitasking. And multitasking is basically when you are working on one thing and then you shift to something else, and then you perhaps go back to the original task that you were working on. And that can be very challenging sometimes for people. So think about you're in the middle of doing an email and the phone rings. And then you finish your phone conversation, you have to get back on task. You have to remember what you were doing, what you were about to write, where you were at with your email. So that's an example of multitasking. We also, oftentimes related to safety issues, have to process information quickly and respond quickly. So that involves, well, for example, a deer. You catch a deer out of your peripheral vision, realize it's about to run potentially across the road in front of your car, and you have to make a very quick decision about what to do. So that's an example of processing speed and needing to think quickly. One of the things when you're thinking about brain fitness, so there's a lot of different skills related to brain fitness. So your question might be, well, what should I focus on? So I've just mentioned 3 areas that tend to be more problematic in Parkinson's, but what we know, of course, is that people are individuals, and what one person may experience may be different from what other people experience. So you have to try to assess what your own strengths and weaknesses are. Um, and it's easy to play into your strengths, but if you really want to work on your brain health, you need to focus on your weaknesses as well. There are a few different ways that you can work on identifying your strengths and weaknesses. You may know right offhand what you're having difficulty with. You're having problems remembering names, or you're having difficulty following a recipe, for example. But you can also, there are some online tools. So if you go on computer, one example is something called Cognicity.com, and you can actually do your own brain health assessment and get some results about where your strengths and weaknesses fall. And of course, you can be professionally evaluated. So if you do one of these online assessments, or if you're having concerns, the best thing to do is to get some professional evaluation. So that being said, then what are some simple things that you can do? And you want to look at both maintenance of your skills to the extent possible, but also how to potentially improve your skills. So you don't need expensive technology, and in fact, I'm going to suggest that you think about perhaps walking away from some of your technology and going back to some old school strategies to work on your brain health. And for much of this, you don't even need much more than a newspaper or a paper and a pencil. So let's take, for example, navigation skills. You're planning a trip, and you say, I've got my GPS. And that might be fine. That might be something you need as a backup. But I would also recommend that you pull out an old-fashioned map and actually try to figure out your route. That's good for your visual spatial skills. It's good for some executive function skills. So figuring out the order in which you would actually make the trip, etc. So that's a real simple thing, and just navigating around your community. It doesn't have to be a big trip, but just pulling out a map and trying to figure out how to do this without the technology. Balancing your checkbook. You walk away from the computer or a calculator and try to do just basic math, addition, subtraction. Practice those skills, because if you're not using them, you will lose them, as we know. One way to get more bang for your buck might be to combine a physical activity and a cognitive activity. So some relatively simple ideas that might actually require something like a DVD would be to learn some Tai Chi moves, or learn some ballroom dancing moves, where you're having to learn how to do movements in a choreographed way, in a particular order. So there's some memory issues, both motor memory and also some potentially verbal memory about what those steps are that you have to remember. But also, if you did it with a group, you would get the socialization, which is also good for your brain health. And you're getting the physical workout as well. So, and really you could take any skill, any swimming, skiing, golfing, bowling, etc. And if you're actually focusing on how to improve your skill, you're using your cognitive abilities to do that. Grabbing a newspaper. There's all sorts of simple things in the paper that you can use. There's the jumble in the Post Standard, for example. There's Sudoku, and sometimes they are easy enough for people who aren't that familiar with them that you can try it. There's Numbricks, for example. So using your newspaper to challenge yourself to do some things that maybe are outside your comfort zone. Another simple thing you can do that's more about creativity is pick out some cartoons. They could be political or otherwise, and come up with your own captions. And you're using the more creative parts of your brain when you're doing that type of activity. Some other simple things you could do with a newspaper to challenge yourself is just go through, pick out an article. This one says, "You're not crazy, there are lots of chipmunks this year." Read through the article and then put it aside, and then challenge yourself to write down as much as you can about what you read. You could do it in writing. You could also do it using drawing, because drawing is also shown to help people remember things better. Discuss it with somebody. Try to remember as much as you can. If you pick a controversial article, which is probably pretty easy in our political environment right now, you could have a discussion with somebody and try to understand their perspective, which is also a very good cognitive exercise, trying to understand other people's perspective on things. You could also take the article and you could pick any letter. So I might pick the letter A and then go through either the whole article or pick out a few paragraphs and just circle the letter A, and make a copy of it and do it again and see how close you get the second time around, or maybe the third time around. But that's a good exercise for sustaining your attention. It's a fairly boring activity, but you really have to focus, so that can be good for that purpose. And one other suggestion is learn how to chunk information so that you can recall it better. So if you've got your grocery list, take items and figure out how you can categorize them. So you might look at all the items on your grocery list and try to remember all the vegetables, all the dairy, all the meat, etc. Put your grocery list away, go through the grocery store, do your grocery shopping, and then before you check out, pull out your list, make sure you haven't forgotten anything. But that's a good way to try to learn a memory strategy and actually start improving some of your memory skills. The last thing I just wanted to say is, whatever you do, keep 3 things in mind: novelty, variety, and challenge. So your brain craves novelty, so keep adding some new activities periodically so that you keep things interesting and fresh for your brain. Do a variety of things, so you're exercising different parts of your brain and different functions. And always look for that sweet spot. So something that is not so easy that you're really not challenging your brain at all, but not so hard that you're going to get frustrated. So you want your brain to sweat a little bit, just like if you were doing a physical exercise. And if you keep those things in mind, try some different activities, hopefully you'll keep your brain as fit as possible for as long as possible.